Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and before World War II, in the first part of the 20th century, there were roughly 100,000 Jews living in Hungary. It constituted 5% of the Hungarian population. And in Hungary's capital city of Budapest, 23% of the population was estimated to be Jewish. In fact, the Jewish presence and influence in Budapest was so vibrant, the city was often called the Jewish Mecca, or Judapest. Actually, Jews have a long and storied history in Hungary, dating back to the 10th century. Some historians suggest a small Jewish presence centuries earlier, all the way back to the Roman Empire. As was true for Jewish communities throughout both Eastern and Western Europe, Hungary sometimes treated Jews well and sometimes did not. When the spirit of nationalism swept through Europe in the second half of the 19th century, the Jews of Hungary were patriotic citizens, actively involved in the Hungarian Revolution, and there were brief periods of Jewish emancipation for the Jews of Hungary. Most relevant to Jewish history, Hungary became a cultural and spiritual center of Judaism, of Jewish tradition, Jewish learning, Jewish life. In the early 19th century, the Hungarian city of Pressburg became a center of Orthodox Judaism, with many major yeshivot and beautiful synagogues, and the spread of Hasidism throughout Hungary. Hungary was a font of Jewish learning, of Yiddishkeit, in some ways extreme, in many ways romantic. The history of Hungarian Jewry is rich and intricate and fascinating to study. But then came World War II. Actually, things began to worsen for the Jews of Hungary in the aftermath of World War I. And after communists briefly gained power in 1919, there was a period known as White Terror, when 300 Jews were massacred and anti-Jewish laws were passed in Hungary beginning in the 1930s, many of which restricted the ability of Jews to earn a living. Then at the start of World War II, Hungary joined with the Axis powers of Germany, Austria, and Italy, annexing territories that enlarged the Hungarian population to more than 800,000. The first Hungarian massacre of Jews took place in July of 1941, when 20,000 were murdered by the Gestapo, aided by Hungarian troops, which is a continuing theme in the life of Hungarian Jewry, the extent to which Hungarians aided the Nazis in murdering Jews. Another massacre of 1,000 Jews occurred in 1942, as Hungary's prime minister proposed his own final solution of the Jewish question by expelling 800,000 Jews from the country. One of the great tragedies of Jewish life in the Shoah is that Nazi Germany did not occupy Hungary until March of 1944, 2 years after Russia won the Battle of Stalingrad, which effectively marked the start of the Allies' defeat of the Third Reich. By March of 1944, D-Day at Normandy was only 3 months away, and the war in Europe would end in 14 months. And yet, the madness, the barbarism of Nazi Germany, the insane thirst for Jewish blood, and the obsession with wiping every Jew off the face of the earth compelled Hitler's war machine to continue the darkest night in human history, and to hunt down and round up and transport and wantonly, callously, brutally murder hundreds of thousands of Jews, hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews, up to Nazi Germany's very last breath. It was in April of 1944, 1 month after Nazi occupation of Hungary, that Adolf Eichmann ordered 400,000 Jews to be confined to ghettos from which they would then be transported, deported to Auschwitz, beginning in May of 1944, only 1 year before the end of the war. In June of 1944, the first transport took some 7,000 Jews to Auschwitz. It was not until October of 1944, only 8 months before the end of the war, that the Jews of Budapest began to be deported. Of the 800,000 Jews who lived in Hungary before World War II, 800,000, more than 500,000 were murdered. 500,000 Hungarian Jews alone in the last months of the war were murdered by the Nazis. If you watch JBS, you know that I had my own special relationship to Elie Wiesel. Everyone who knew Elie seemed to have a special relationship with him. It was a gift of his soul and a gift to everyone he embraced. One of the things that deeply troubled Elie Wiesel throughout his entire adult life was why the Allies never warned the Jews of Hungary, of his community of Sziget, of what the Nazis were doing to hundreds of thousands, millions of Jews in Auschwitz and Treblinka and Majdanek and Belzec and Sobibor. He always told me, we would have run away into the forest. We could hear the advancing Russian guns in the distance. We could have saved ourselves, but no one told us. America didn't tell us. Great Britain didn't tell us. We simply didn't know. We simply didn't understand. And so we perished. Few Hungarian communities remained after the Shoah. And when the communists gained power in Hungary in 1949, there was another wave of anti-Jewish legislation and persecution. But there's something extraordinary in Jewish perseverance, in Jewish survival. And today, there's a growing Jewish community in Hungary. Despite this unimaginable resurgence of anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe, there are some 150,000 Jews creating a vibrant Jewish community in Hungary. Their story is astounding. It's inspirational. It is important. And it's being fueled by some of the most remarkable and creative and dedicated men and women in the Jewish world today. We should all know the story of Hungarian Jewry, not simply its tragic past, but its amazing present and its fabulous future. And on this edition of L'Chaim, lucky, lucky me, I have the opportunity to introduce to you one of the individuals who's a part of the Jewish revival in Hungary, Zsuzsa Fritz, director of the Balint Jewish Community Center in Budapest, which is the only JCC in Hungary, which has become a center of Jewish life. She's also the educational consultant of the Lauder Summer Camp for Jewish Youth, and she's a founding board member of the Haver Foundation in Hungary, which promotes education about Judaism and the Shoah in public schools throughout Hungary. It is such a joy having you at this table. First of all, Mazal Tov. The work you're doing is extraordinary. and it is a pleasure to be able to sit with you. Thank you for giving us time.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure for me too.
Good. Zsuzsa, I want to understand who you are.
Okay.
Let's start there.
Sure.
You were born in
Budapest.
Budapest.
Yes.
How is your English so good?
I'm an English teacher.
Okay.
Originally, that's what I majored in.
Okay. Growing up, I read there was something remarkable. When did you really learn you were a Jew? How did that happen? You did not know growing up, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Tell me the story.
So I was born 1966 into a family of multi-generations, basically in the same house. It was my parents and my maternal grandparents. For those who have been to Budapest, I grew up about 3 minutes from the Houses of Parliament and the Chain Bridge, very historic center, basically. And I had a wonderful childhood.
Was your family well-to-do?
In the communism, nobody was well-to-do. They were, before the Holocaust, they were middle class. But no, nobody had anything during communist times. So we had an apartment. We lived in an apartment which was not big, but not small. I had my own little room. We went hiking, and we were traveling around in Hungary.
You said it was a good childhood.
It was a wonderful childhood.
Why wonderful?
I got so much love. I was an only child.
Yes. What were your parents' names?
My mother's name was Eva, and my father's name was Imre.
Nice people?
Very nice people.
Wonderful people?
Wonderful people.
So you had a wonderful mother and a wonderful father?
Yeah, and wonderful grandparents, my mother's parents. They lived with us. Otto, who I called Toto because I couldn't say Otto, and Yoli.
Okay, so it was a multi-generational family, and it was close and warm and lovely.
Very close, yeah. And we had a lot of visitors in the house. And basically, as I learned later, everybody was Jewish.
But you didn't know it at the time.
And I had no idea. There was no symbol, nothing that would give that away in the house, nothing. I mean, later on, I learned things like that whenever my grandparents would see somebody Jewish on the TV, they would see unsere, which means in German, one of ours, Michelanu.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Did you have any idea what it meant at the time? Why would they say one of ours?
Because it was important for them. Like
yes, but what did it mean to you? When they said it.
I didn't understand. It was in
Yes.
German, so I had no idea. I had no idea what they're doing. But, as a child, you're ignorant. You don't pay attention to a lot of things. And later on, like, And they all spoke German, so whenever they didn't want me to understand, they would say "nicht vor dem Kind," not in front of the child, and then they would,
Otherwise, it was Hungarian.
Otherwise, it was only Hungarian.
Yes. And where were they from that they spoke German?
So my grandfather was born in Budapest, but his father came from a German-speaking area of Czechoslovakia. So basically, his father's mother tongue was German, and he spoke fluent German as well. My grandmother spoke German because that was the language to learn, not English, but German. They were very assimilated already before the Holocaust, so they didn't speak Yiddish. They were secular. My mother didn't speak German. She was the only one in this family, although she had a nanny who was supposed to teach her German.
Did you feel like you were a patriotic Hungarian?
No.
What did you feel like as a child?
I felt like I'm fine. It's a good question. You see, I remember a conversation I had when I was like 7 or 8 in the classroom. We were 3 girls speaking in the break. And so suddenly one of them whispering, "What religion are you?" And so I started thinking, what religion am I? And then one of us said, "I'm Roman Catholic." And I somehow knew I'm not Roman Catholic. There were no crosses in our apartment. So I said I was Protestant. That's how much I didn't know. We were not Hungarians. We were against the communists. So I could feel that. I could sense that as a child, that my family doesn't like the regime. Because of many reasons, we really struggled and suffered the communism.
Okay, but you suffered as other Hungarian families suffered, not because you were Jewish.
No.
Right.
No, not because we're Jewish,
Okay.
because we were a shop owner.
Okay, and also, you have to explain to me because I don't understand.
Yes, sure.
I said to you, did you feel as if you were a patriotic Hungarian? You said no, because you didn't like communism. In your mind, was patriotism at the time, if there was a patriotic Hungarian family, were they somehow enamored with and committed to communism?
Well, it's, yeah, in a way, yes. Like you were not patriotic Hungarian because either you were a communist and then you were international,
Right.
and nationalism was not a question. We are all part of the communist bloc. Or you were against, and then you could have been a patriotic Hungarian because the Hungarian nationalists were also against communism, but they would keep it very low-key because that was against the regime. So we were not neither nor.
Okay. Did you experience what others have described being part of what becomes the Soviet Union, that you were in some way not free?
Yes.
How were you not free?
We could not travel abroad only after long processes. We were not free to express our opinions. We were very limited in our choices. If you went into a store or something, there was a lot of presence of police and authorities, and and people would keep quiet about things.
Interesting. What did your father do for a living?
He was a cab driver.
Okay. Even though you're describing a hard social scene, I come back to the fact that you said you had a wonderful childhood.
I really
Somehow
had.
it did not impact you as a child,
No,
correct?
it didn't. It didn't. I think they did everything they could also as a family to protect me from all those things that they experienced, that they knew that limits them. So, yeah.
Did you have, and out of nowhere, did you have any sense of either the United States or of Israel?
Israel, no, not at all. United States, yes, because my parents' very good friends dissided to the United States, and so there was a correspondence with them, and I sensed that my parents really love America and adore, and that's the country of freedom. Later on, I learned that my mother wanted to immigrate actually in '56, but then stayed. So yeah, America was something we talked about a lot. Also, we had Australian relatives who sometimes visited, so that was also kind of like on the radar.
Okay, you're too young for the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah.
Okay.
You didn't talk about Israel in those times.
You didn't.
Didn't, because that was also problematic.
And again, you're not Jewish as far as you know at that time.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So also that is...
All right, pick up the story.
Okay, so my father passed away when I was 16. He had lung cancer. And it was very, very difficult. I loved my father, adored him.
Sorry.
He was a wonderful man. And it was at his funeral that I suddenly connected the pieces together, because he had
to take me through the moment. Is it the funeral or at the cemetery?
It's at the cemetery,
Okay.
funeral in the cemetery.
The funeral is over. Oh, the funeral's in the cemetery. Yeah. You're there, your mother's there?
Yeah, everybody's there.
Everybody's there. What do you see or hear or experience that is surprising to you?
Everything around me was surprising. I mean, I was in mourning. As a 16-year-old, this was basically one of my first times in the cemetery at all, or maybe the first time. And I didn't know what's going on, but I suddenly understand, standing there, seeing the rabbi in the garment and all the people that were Jewish, that it's all a Jewish ceremony, that, there was Hebrew, the rabbi and the cantor sang and spoke in Hebrew, besides, of course, the funeral speech, which was in Hungarian, but everything else was in Hebrew, which I didn't understand. It all sounded, interestingly, it all sounded strange and familiar at the same time. And then you see the gravestones with the Hebrew letters and the kippot on the heads of the men, and the scarves, and it's all at the same time very foreign, and at the same time you have this feeling of, It's not like the feeling of, oh my God.
It wasn't.
No, it was, I think it was like, So, you know, I went through many times, and I think, you know, probably if I had asked the question, Mom, are we Jewish? Probably she would have said yes. But based on what would I have asked the question?
I want to understand, because you said it so well. It wasn't it was Somehow it drew you. It didn't repel you.
No, it didn't.
How do you explain that, do you think? Isn't that, you know, you're a professional in so many ways. So you've been a teacher, you're a counselor. So you reflect.
Yes.
As you reflect upon your own reaction to that moment, which when I understood that something like that happened to you, I said to myself, I don't know how anybody can experience a more dramatic moment in life. But as you look at your own life, how do you look at it and say to yourself, what was happening to me, and why would I be drawn to this, as opposed to what in this, aghast at it? What do you think it was?
I think it was that it was all the time around me, that I was brought up by Jews in a Jewish environment. It was never spoken about. It was never opened up, because I think that they thought that they protect me with this, but it was all around me. So afterwards, you know, when I looked at my parents and my grandparents, they were so Jewish. Oh my God, how did I not notice?
How were they Jewish?
In everything, I don't know, in their reactions, the jokes they made, the questions they asked, you know, it's like when I watched Annie Hall later on, and they put the two families, one next to the other, and one is the Christian. Yes, that's my family. They all the time talk. My grandfather was disgusting in many ways around the table, and you know, and told me totally inappropriate jokes. So it was just never labeled. It was never tagged that, yes, this is a Jewish family.
Did it make you happy?
No, I don't think it made me happy. I think it made me curious and a little insecure in who I am, because
Why?
because I'm 16 and suddenly, what does that mean? What does it mean to be Jewish? It made me.
Were you angry that they didn't tell you?
No, I know. I never.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I would be annoyed. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked your mother that.
No.
Nor did she ever volunteer. Did your mother ever say to you at one point, I want you to know why you grew up not knowing you're a Jew?
No, I never asked. She once made a remark about something that she did a couple of months after that basically pushed me into the Jewish community.
What?
So this all happened in November, and I think around March or April the next year, she just suddenly, out of the blue, tells me, look, go to the rabbinical seminar on Friday evening. And I'm like, what? Well, there is this synagogue and the rabbinical seminary, and Kati went there and she met a boy. So go you two. Take Tamash. Tamash was a son of her friends.
And who's Kati?
Kati was her best friend's daughter. And you know, I went, which I'm surprised at, you know, when I tell this story. Like, yeah, I went. I was very obedient. Mom says, I go. And I grabbed along this Tamash, who, you know, it seems that I knew that he was also Jewish, or I was told that he can come with me. And I went. And, well, it was still 1980s, communism. There was very little happening Jewishly for young people then. It was mostly Holocaust commemoration services. Synagogue, which very few people went because that was dangerous. And this thing happened, and a lot of young people came. So many years later, actually a few years before she passed away, she once said, I really wanted you to get out of the house because we were sad, it was hard, and we wanted you to be among young people. So that was her motivation. And later on, I also learned that she was going as a young person to a club where almost everybody was Jewish. It was a social thing to meet someone Jewish. So that was important for her. That was the only thing important for her. She didn't want me to become a Jewish professional. She didn't want me to become religious or observant or whatever. She wanted me to meet a Jewish boy.
Interesting. So she never told you, but you must have some thoughts of your own. What were the reasons why your parents created a home for you in which the fact that you were Jewish, even if you now recognize there were signs, it was never explicit, and you grew up without a Jewish identity? Why did they do that, do you think?
I think partly because they thought it's not going to be a topic anymore, and it's better that way. They just went through the hell. So they wanted me to be safe, secure. It's communism, so this question is off the table. It's better if she grows up, without this whole bundle of problems. I think that's why.
Did your family have a history in the Shoah?
Yes.
What was it?
So my mother's family survived because in Budapest. Because my mother had a Roman Catholic nanny, and she basically saved the whole family. She first saved my mother and my grandmother into a Carmelite convent, then she took my grandfather there, and then my great-grandfather.
A righteous Gentile.
Yes.
Remarkable people,
Yeah.
So that's how your mother survived.
Yeah.
They knew when they were being hidden, they were Jewish.
Yes, of course.
Do you think in part that experience influenced them, that they did not want to inflict that on their child?
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Did you ever have a chance to talk to your mother about her experience in the Shoah?
A little bit. A little bit. She always said that for her, the most difficult thing was that she had to learn a new identity. She had a false paper. And she was 6. She was very young. She said she didn't understand. No, she's Evike. And then they tried and tried and tried until she understood that she is, when they ask her, this is the name that she has. And she said that was the hardest thing of all.
What did it mean to you at 16 to find out you're a Jew? Was it a religious classification for you? Was it a nationalist? In other words, you were already asked by a friend, what religion are you? And she tells you she's Roman Catholic. You say Protestant because you don't know what to say.
Yeah.
When you learn you're a Jew, how does your self-identity change? And where do you position it?
I don't know. I really don't know. At first, it was an empty word. I just felt I'm different. So when you first go into your classroom as a Jew, it's like, I'm different from them.
Did you feel different?
Yeah, I feel it. And then you find other Jews in your classroom. And then it's kind of like, oh, I have this secret group now. And then slowly, I started going back every Friday. I had suddenly this peer group and friends who had very similar stories, because my story is a very typical story in Hungary. I'm not the only person who learns later in life. And then we learned from each other what it means, and we struggled with these questions: are we Jewish Hungarian or Hungarian Jews? And all these very important questions then seemed like, this is life. We have to answer this question. So yeah, and later on, and it took a long time. I'll be very honest with you. I went through periods that I thought that you can only be Jewish if you pray in the synagogue. I went through times when I was going to be observant, and then at a certain point I found what kind of a Jew I want to be, and
At roughly what age?
35.
Okay, very honest.
Yeah.
And now tell me, what kind of Jew do you want to be?
I want to be a Jew who knows what Judaism is about and who builds her life around the Jewish milestones. I'm a Jew who sometimes finds spirituality in praying, sometimes not. But most of my Jewish experience is connected to being in a community of Jews. And one of the most important things for me as a Jew is being in a dialogue, a constant dialogue as a Jew about who we are and why we do things and how we should do things. And yeah, that's...
Do you think at any point your mother was happy for you that you now developed a Jewish identity?
I think yes. I think it was also a process for her. When in 1990, I got this offer to work for JDC in Budapest when they opened their office. I was a teacher then. I was teaching English for 2 years. And I went home and said, Mom, I got this offer and I really want to take it. And for the first time in my life, I saw she was frightened. She was really frightened. She said, do you really want to work for the Jews? And I, yes, I do.
What frightened her? What about it was frightening?
I think it's the same thing, that she felt that if I work in the Jewish community, it's still dangerous. That might be bad for me in the future because the communism comes back, because the Nazis come back, because it's just safer not to do that. And I said, yes, I want to do it. And she would never say no to things that I wanted to do. She would always support me. Of course, she would look differently. And she could see on her face that she's not very happy about it, but she would never say it. Mm-hmm. And I think a couple of years later, when she saw how happy and satisfied I am in what I do, she made her peace with it. So much so that she started working for the Jewish community. She started working as a pensioner for one of the Jewish newspapers.
How marvelous is that?
Yeah.
You must be proud of her too then.
I'm very proud of her.
Yeah. That's remarkable. Are you married?
Not yet. I'm going to be married in June.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
To a Jewish kid?
Yes.
So what she wanted and you wanted, you are going to fulfill. What's his name?
His name is Daniel.
He wasn't this boy you took to your first, your mother's.
No, he wasn't. No,
what does Daniel do?
So Daniel works for CARE International in Vienna. He's a political scientist who's been working basically in human aid all his life. And the funny thing is we met in 1989 for the first time in our lives because he was involved in the Jewish student organization in Vienna. He's Austrian. I was involved in the youth life, in Jewish youth life in Hungary, and they organized a seminar in Vienna, and they said they want to embrace these Hungarian Jewish students who just came out from communism. And so they invited us for a 3-day seminar. They called it humbly, Let My People Know.
Very nice.
Yeah, so it was great, and that's how we met. And then we lost contact for many years.
And then you regained contact.
And exactly.
That's just lovely. There is a uniqueness to your story because of the context. There's also a larger story that is very Jewish everywhere, including here in America. So I want you to reflect now from your experience. You know, there are many American Jews growing up, their late teens and their 20s and their early 30s. And they're struggling with their own Jewish identity and their relationship to the Jewish tradition on the one hand and their relationship to Israel on the other. You went through you had a journey of your own to get to wherever you are now. And when I said to you, what does it mean to you now? You gave me this gorgeous explanation of what it is to be a Jew for you. Do you know anything about American Jewry enough to say to me that when you look at it, there are either similarities that interest you, or there are similarities, or not even similarities, there are things that disappoint you or sadden you?
In American Jewry?
Yes. You understand, American Jewry is in crisis as well. American Jewry, but by the way, there's a large, vibrant Jewish community here. But there is rampant assimilation. The intermarriage rate now outside of the Orthodox community is at 70%. There is abysmal ignorance. And many American Jews feel much more American than they do Jewish. And even if they're, if you say to them, you know you're a Jew? Yes. Are you proud you're a Jew? Yes. What's it mean to you in real life? They could never give the kind of explanation or definition that you gave. It is a different world, and at the same time, when I listen to you, it just occurred to me that there is something of commonality, and I wonder, out of your experience, whether you have any insight at all.
I don't think I know enough about American Jewry to judge it. I can tell you that two things. I look up to the American Jewry because it exposed me to a Jewish pluralism I've never known. Because in Hungary, Jewish pluralism is just starting to spread because of the trauma that my community went through. So when this community started to be reborn, it went back to certain black and white things. And it needed it to grab it and to survive and to be reborn. But there is a time when you start looking around and you start realizing that it's 2018 and you need to define your Judaism for yourself. What does it mean? Especially with so many hidden stories and secrets that people have, they need to find a way into the community, and that has to be very open. So, this is where I found it. This is where I take examples from, that you can be Jewish so many different ways, and there's so many different Jewish journeys. But I do think that we, in Hungary and in Eastern Europe, we also have a lot to teach the American Jews because of what we went through and because of how we suddenly find our ways back against all odds. We find our way back to our Judaism, and these secret stories just push people into their communities when they come out. There's immense energy that comes with it. This want, this will, I want to be Jewish. I want to do something with it. I don't even know what it means to be Jewish, but I want to do it. So this can, I think this energy can actually fertilize American Jewry.
That's lovely.
So the connection between us needs to be very strong because of that, because we have a lot to learn from you, and you can take something from us as well.
That is lovely. Talk to me now for a moment about Hungarian Jewry today. And what excites you most? But in some way, it's a miracle. Who would have ever thought that in Hungary, after the Shoah, there was going to be the reemergence that is so vibrant and which you're a part of. But for all the viewers here, we've never been to Hungary. Maybe some of you have, but the vast majority of us have never been to Hungary. If I visited you in Budapest, what would the Jewish community and Jewish life feel like? What excites you about the fact that you are helping the Jewish community of Budapest be what it is?
Okay, so what excites me is that I can create a similar experience to Hungarian Jews that I had when I was 16. That I can actually see them make the very first baby steps towards their community and see how they open up and how they find meaning and how they start connecting and start being so enthusiastic about it. So that's what excites me the most. The other thing that excites me is to create new things, programs that are just new and fresh.
For example?
And well, one of the things that we did for many years in the JCC, for example, is a mimuna. So for those who don't know what is mimuna, it's a Moroccan Jewish custom. Right after Passover is over, the Moroccan Jews open up their houses and they prepare a lot of dough and sweets and everything, and they just go and visit each other and they have fun. So we are an Ashkenazi community. We have no connection to Moroccan Jews at all. So because we wanted to give positive Jewish identity, we looked for something that is really just about food and happiness, so we created a mimuna. And so it was like basically a concert and food and a way to mingle and meet others and just be happy about being Jewish. That's one of the things. The other thing is Judah Fest. It's a Jewish street festival that we organize once a year, where we go out into one of the public streets in the Jewish quarter, and it's a street festival. 12,000 people come, big majority Jewish, and they just walk through the streets, and they have programs for their children, concerts, the Jewish organizations are out there, and it's just a wonderful, happy occasion of being Jewish. So that excites me. And I can provide something that, you know, the people will go home and they say, oh, actually, being Jewish is fun. Because it's still a struggle because of the depth of the trauma that this community went through. What you said at the beginning, that basically within 3 months, the community was decimated. And then 3 years later, communism just silences everything. So it's been decades that it was there under, and it was nothing but the trauma, the frustration, the fear, the insecurity. And suddenly, all this energy comes out, and I want Jews to see that being Jewish is fun, it's happiness, it's values, it's belonging, it's home.
If I was at the JCC, what ages would I see?
All ages.
Really?
Yeah.
Young people and older?
Yeah, young people and older. You would see toddlers, you would see, we have a little daycare, you would see seniors, Holocaust survivors, you will see adults, young adults, teenagers, all ages. We're trying to reach really so that whichever age you come in, you connect to something. So you will find something. One of our major goals for the next years is to enlarge the young adult population, because that's the toughest, that's the most challenging.
Always.
But we just organized a big Sukkot Havdalah, which had more than 200 young adult students.
Fabulous.
So we're trying that. Yeah, so all ages.
If I walk through Judah Fest, what ages do I see?
That also, all ages, yeah. Like a lot of families with children, because it's great for a Sunday to bring your kids out. You would see a lot of seniors for whom it's, you know, for a lot of people still, it's very difficult to go into a Jewish place. Even the JCC, which I do believe it's one of the most open institutions ever, for people, it's even difficult to step in. Because that's a statement. That's a Jewish statement. That's like saying, yes, I'm Jewish. The first years after the JCC was open, we had a list out there at the entrance asking people to sign up so that we can send our programs. Very few people would do that. And when we asked why, I said, I don't want Jewish Post to come. I don't want others in the building to know that I'm Jewish. And maybe it's not that strong anymore, but still a lot of people would feel reluctant to go into, I mean, not speaking about a synagogue, because that's a clear statement, but even to a JCC. So street festival gives you a very easy way to like just walk through, pretend that I'm just passing by, and you have a Jewish day, actually.
So people are still a little frightened or reluctant.
Yeah, well, as you said, it's 150,000 Jews out there, and we do reach a lot, but there are still many who we could potentially reach.
So you will. It just takes time.
Yes,
You'll do it.
I do believe it.
You'll do it. By the way, JDC has made a lot of this possible.
Yes.
And there are going to be viewers who don't understand what JDC is and why it is making, you know, one of the most important contributions to Jewish life throughout the world. Speak for a moment about your relationship and connection in terms of the work you do to the JDC.
So JDC is operating the JCC. JDC is the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee that was born in 1914. It's an old and wonderful organization that helped Jews all over the world in the biggest crisis and also in between crises, with renewal, with rehabilitation, with Jewish education, everything. So they're the main founders of the JCC and many other things in Hungary and in Eastern Europe.
They're making Jewish life possible for you.
They're making Jewish life possible for us.
Everybody in the Jewish community should both know of and appreciate what the JDC does. I'm glad you were able to say that to me. Do you know Jonathan Ornstein?
Yes, I do.
Tell our viewers who he is.
So Jonathan Ornstein is the director of the JCC in Krakow.
Yes.
Who basically does a very important mission, because there are tens and thousands of Jewish tourists to Auschwitz. And up until the JCC in Krakow was opened, it was basically a visit to death camps. And Jonathan started sending the message out there that there is Jewish life in Poland, and invited people to the JCC.
In some way, I consider him to be your counterpart.
Yes.
That what you're doing in Hungary, he's doing in Poland.
Yes.
And there is a week-long music fest in Krakow.
Yes.
So maybe one, as you do this more and more, your festival will increase. But it's an extraordinary week of music. And it's interesting, again, for American Jews to see the kind of vibrancy that's in the Jewish community where we thought Jewish life had been extinguished. Yes. We also now read all the time, especially in Hungary, there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism. To what extent, not is it true, to what extent does it impact your life or the life of the people you deal with?
Honestly, not much, because it's a political anti-Semitism. It's mostly created for political gains by parties, by the government, by...
What's its goal?
Its goal is to win votes from the far right, in my mind.
Not necessarily to persecute Jews.
No, definitely not. So we don't feel it physically in our everyday life. We don't feel that. Really, like you walk into the JCC, you won't even sense that there is much security. It's not related to the Jews. It's related to the image of the Jews.
Interesting. This is a very sensitive question. In the American Jewish community, there is almost an obsession with the dangers of anti-Semitism. What you're saying is not going to make some people happy. There are people who believe that their mission and their fundraising is to protect Jews from anti-Semitism. And that we hear all the time, and when we hear about anti-Semitism in Hungary, we don't think of political anti-Semitism as you just described. We imagine Jews huddled somewhere in danger. We imagine what we see happening in France, where you can't wear a kippah, you can't wear a yarmulke in Paris, or outside of Paris. You can't wear a Magen David, a Star of David, where you want police at every synagogue. To imagine that in Western Europe is almost incomprehensible. There is the image that the Hungarian Jewish population or the Polish Jewish population is facing the same experience. You're describing something a bit different.
Because it is different. It really is different. I think, look, I'm not going to say that we don't feel that there is anti-Semitism in the air, that there is floating, that sometimes phrases used and sometimes phrases allowed, or a narrative is allowed which reminds very much of the 1930s. But it is not the 1930s. And I think the best way to fight anti-Semitism in Hungary, at least, is to make the community stronger. Because there is a community, it's vibrant, it's thriving, there are more and more things happening, and the more we can bring people to their community, and the more we can solidify Jewish identity, then the stronger this community will be. And that's the way to say, we don't care about what they're saying because that's just not relevant.
But when you describe to me that there are some people who are still reluctant to publicly demonstrate they're Jewish, for other people to see them walk into the JCC as opposed to the festival,
Yeah.
is that because they're afraid of anti-Semitism?
Most of the time not. I
What
don't
is
think
it?
so.
What is it?
It's the built-in. Traumas are given from generation to generation. You know, it's like many parents will say, even if the kid knows that he's Jewish, don't say that to anyone. You know, it's a family thing. No, nobody has to know, and there's no reason. It's just that it's like my family. Then that they thought the best if the kid doesn't know. It will protect him.
So what about you in Israel? At what point do you really become aware of Israel? You said that as a child it was irrelevant to you.
Yeah.
Even as you become aware of your Jewishness at 16, it's not about Israel.
No.
At some point, does Israel begin to play a role in your life?
Yes.
Tell me how.
So I got really involved, 1982, 1983. I got more and more involved in Jewish community life. And then slowly, people started to go to Israel because it was more and more possible, different ways, of course, because there was still no diplomatic relationship. So I started feeling this pressure that I'm a Jew, I have to go to Israel. It wasn't, I'd be honest, it wasn't from inside. It was like my friends have all been, so I should. So 1989, diplomatic relationships are reestablished between Hungary and Israel. And there was a man of blessed memory. His name was Evan Eliezer. He was a Holocaust survivor from Hungary living in Israel. And he started organizing groups to Israel, to the kibbutzim of Takam, of the Takam movement. And there was either you went as a young adult, a student, and then you worked for like 5 weeks in a kibbutz, and then 1 week. It was like the, before birthright. And then one week of traveling around. And there was another type for teenagers, 3 weeks in a kibbutz and 1 week around. So I signed up. I was an English teacher. I had the greatest profile of all. And they took me. So in 1989, I arrived to Israel for the first time in my life, 4 in the morning because of the flight, with 15 teenagers. We were put on a bus, and we went up to Kibbutz Kfar Sod, where we spent 3 weeks. I didn't see Jerusalem, didn't see Tel Aviv, didn't see Haifa, anything, just the kibbutz. I had such a wonderful time.
Did you?
I fell in love.
Oh.
And then we, of course, traveled around. We saw Jerusalem, but by then I was totally hooked. And
to this day.
I remember getting on the plane on the way back, and me with tears streaming from my eyes. I was like, this is just a dream country. So ever since then, I'm very connected to Israel. I studied a year in Israel. I speak Hebrew. Israel is a very important connection to my Judaism.
To what extent are you representative of a mainstream of Hungarian Jews? To what extent are Hungarian Jews now, in some way, committed to, supportive of, care about Israel?
I think Hungarian Jews, or those who have some Jewish identity, are very connected to Israel. There are a lot of people who have families in Israel. They look at Israel, they watch the news, they're very much following what happens. The generation 30s and 40s who speak some Hebrew, have been to Israel maybe longer time, they're also very critical of Israeli politics sometimes, so there's more knowledge. But all in all, I think people love Israel in Hungary. There's a very solid connection. There is an Israeli Cultural Institute. The embassy does a lot of things. So yeah, there is a connection.
So Zsuzsa, what message can you leave us with? Here we are. You are a treasure. You are a treasure. And you've given us a window into something we know very little about. If there's one overarching message, what would you leave us with as you expose us to and introduce us to this transcending Jewish moment of rebirth in Hungarian Jewry?
I think I would say be part of our story. Come visit us, see it to yourself, see it with your own eyes, and talk to us, contact us. You know what? We have so many people who will be happy to share their stories and their insight into Hungarian Jewish community life. And Budapest is a wonderful city to visit. It's more and more tourists are coming. It's bustling. It's really a thriving city. So come, really be a part of our story.
Okay, so if I come with my wife, can I come visit you?
Of course.
I wish you mazal tov on your
so
impending
much.
wedding. It has been an absolute joy meeting you. I hope you'll stop by as often as possible and just share insight. But I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha. Only the best. Continue the work you're doing. Mazal tov to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, darling. Thank you.
Thanks.
Zsuzsa Fritz, director of the Balint Jewish Community Center in Budapest, educational consultant of the Lauder Summer Camp for Jewish Youth, a founding board member of the Haver Foundation in Hungary, which provides education about Judaism and the Shoah in public schools throughout Hungary. She is an incredible human being, making a transcending contribution to Jewish life today. I hope you've enjoyed everything she has to say, and that you've enjoyed meeting her here on L'chaim. And by the way, special thanks for this edition of L'chaim to Kathy Lusky for helping to arrange our meeting with Zsuzsa. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the ideas expressed here on this edition of L'chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook page, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from many of you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please, indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.